everyone, and welcome back to Salt Talks. What we're trying to do on these Salt Talks and at our conferences is provide a window into the minds of subject matter experts, as well as provide a platform for what we think are big ideas that are shaping the future. And we are thrilled today to welcome you to the third installment of our Pandemic Venture Investment Series, where top entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders dive deep into the challenges and opportunities arising from the pandemic crisis, and discuss breakthrough technologies that address issues from the coronavirus prevention and cure to social distancing and food supply. The series is presented in partnership with OurCrowd, which is a leading global venture investment platform. And today's episode is titled Startups Tackling COVID and Other Global Health Challenges. And it features Eyal Desheh, chairman of MigVax, Dr. Gilly Regev, chief executive of SaNOtize, and Dr. Gidi Stein, the co-founder and chief executive officer of Medaware. Today's episode will be moderated by OurCrowd's chief content officer, Matthew Kalman. Just a reminder, if you have any questions during today's talk, you can enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your video screen on Zoom. And now I'll kick it over to Matthew to host today's talk.
Thank you, John. And welcome to this, the third episode in the Pandemic Venture Investment Series of Salt Talks, presented with OurCrowd, where we showcase the latest advances in startup technology that's helping to address this worldwide crisis. I'm Matthew Kalman, the Chief Content Officer at OurCrowd, which is a global venture investing platform based here in Jerusalem. Today, we're going straight to the heart of the crisis to speak to three CEOs of medical startups at the cutting edge of the battle against COVID-19, helping us to overcome the challenges of safer and more efficient healthcare. Joining us today is Dr. Gilly Regev, the CEO of SaNOtize. They're based in Canada, and they've been conducting clinical trials of what I think is the world's first and only proven therapy against the coronavirus. We also have Eyal Desheh, the chairman of the board of MigVax, an Israeli company developing what will be an oral vaccine against COVID-19. And we have Dr. Gidi Stein, the CEO of Medaware, which uses artificial intelligence to prevent errors in medication that are a leading cause of unnecessary deaths among patients. So we have lots to discuss. Let's start with the search for a vaccine against the coronavirus. There's been big news this past week about the success of trials of a vaccine being developed by Pfizer. And let's begin with the chairman of MigVax, Eyal Desheh. Now, Eyal, you have many years of experience of drug and therapy development in your previous role as executive vice president and chief financial officer of Teva Pharmaceuticals. So from your experience, does the news from Pfizer this week mean that it's game over, they have the solution, and you and your team at MigVax can just pack your bags and shut up shop? Do we still need an oral vaccine?
Well, first of all, good morning and good afternoon, everyone that is listening to us. Happy to be here and share some of my thoughts and our thought at MigVax, how we address this challenging pandemic and what's our approach and what we see from the view from our window, how it looks like. First of all, I think it's the announcement by Pfizer that they believe that their vaccine is safe and effective is great news. I am convinced that there will be others that will follow. Different mechanism of actions. There will be vaccines against COVID-19. It is challenging, but it seems to be possible. And by the way, let's not forget that it was developed at record time. And never in the history of medicine, a vaccine was developed so fast and so quickly. But nobody really started from zero. That said, I would cautious from declaring victory. I think that if we learn something important and major about the coronavirus since it was introduced early this year, at the beginning of this year, is that we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know enough. There are so many researches and studies conducted all over the world. There's, I think I read somewhere that there's an article or a paper on the subject which is issued every 3 seconds. So a lot of people are really diving very deeply into how to solve this virus and possible other viruses that might follow. We might be, at the beginning of an era that's not a race for the vaccine; it's a race after the virus. But I think, to start with, it's great news. For me, and you mentioned I spent 17 years in Teva. I didn't do drug development myself, but I did fund it, and looked at results and how the process works. The idea that a vaccine for such a major disease or virus is approved based on a sample of 100 people that were diagnosed, especially those people that were not diagnosed and were in the trial. It's a little difficult for me to digest. I think that over time we'll have more data. There'll be more people. I think we need much more data and experience in order to be convinced that this is it. There'll be other vaccines, no question. Now let's say something about what we do in MigVax. We're developing oral vaccine, which is simple to use, easy to administer, doesn't need minus 70 degrees freezing, can be kept in the refrigerator of the school, and the school nurse can give a small ampule to the students to drink, and then come again 3 weeks later and give them the second dose, and hopefully they are immune, they're vaccinated. So it's very, very simple to operate. It's also simple to produce. Once we cracked, and we believe we cracked, the construct of the materials, and which was not easy to develop. That's why it's taking us time. But as I said before, nobody really started from zero or from scratch. We're based on many years of research in chicken, a vaccine that was developed in Eyal Academic Institute in the north part of Israel by very experienced and capable scientists. It's a construct of 3 proteins and adjuvant that leads them to the right immune system in the body. It's mucosal, go through the throat and then to our digestion system, where it activates the immune systems in the body. And it has experience in millions and millions of chicken that were vaccinated successfully with this technology. Now we validated this with mice, and we're ready for the final trial with animals before we move into our phase 1/2 in humans. And we hope that if everything works right, a little less than a year from now, we'll have an oral, a safe, easy to use vaccine that will be available. So let's keep our finger crossed, because it still is extremely challenging. And as I said, there'll be room for a number of vaccines around the world. And at the end of the day, there should be enough to really vaccinate everybody if we want to get rid of this thing.
So you're looking maybe at, by the end of next year, you think that this might be ready to be on the market?
Yeah, with the disclaimer that we need to go through the phases successfully, and everybody that was involved in development of vaccines, of drugs, knows how many things might go wrong. But we're hopeful, because we look at the success of this technology with millions, hundreds of millions of birds, of chickens that were vaccinated against a virus from the same SARS family, very, very similar in its structure to the COVID-19. So we know it works. We absolutely know it works, but development is a process with many hurdles.
Let's bring in some other people from our panel, because until we have a vaccine, we need protection from the coronavirus. We have masks, we have sanitizer, we have social distancing, but a Canadian company called SaNOtize believes it can go one step further, and with a simple nasal spray, it can actually kill the virus after we've inhaled it, but before it spreads to the lungs. And Dr. Gilly Regev, who's the CEO of SaNOtize, is with us. Dr. Regev, so what's the difference between a therapy and a vaccine?
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you all for being here. First of all, I would like to say I agree with Eyal. There won't be one treatment. It will be a combination of a few different treatments, and vaccines will be some of them, but it's not necessarily just a vaccine. I think the big difference, they're both, we're talking about prevention. The vaccine will prevent you from getting sick from the disease. It's not that far from what SaNOtize is doing. SaNOtize has, I think we were the first company that actually came out with a nasal spray back in April, with the idea that the virus multiply in the nose. And if the virus multiply in the nose and we can kill the virus at that point before it becomes a full-blown infection, then we cure the disease. The big advantage of what SaNOtize has, I think, is that it's not specific to this specific virus, or if the virus mutates or changes, then this will still work. So our treatment, our nasal spray, is based on a delivery of nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is a natural molecule that we all produce in our body. It is our body's first line of defense against infection. So it's not something new to the body. And when we deliver it topically through a liquid that delivers the nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, there was a publication that came out last month that was from a university from Uppsala University in Sweden, that the researcher actually said that nitric oxide is the only compound so far that have shown a direct effect on the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So we know nitric oxide kills the virus. We know that if you get the right dose to the right place, you will get rid of the virus. And what we have done so far, we've already done in vitro. So we took our liquid formulation, we show that it can get rid of the virus very quickly in the lab. And then we've done recently, I don't think I even updated you, Matthew, but recently we have done some animal testing in hamsters and have shown that the day post-infection, we got a few log reductions of the virus in the nose of hamsters, which is a very strong model because they have receptors similar to human. So we know that this has a huge efficacy potential. We have completed over 100 people in a phase 2 clinical trial in Canada. We've shown very strong safety of this nasal spray. And all that's left for us is to complete a phase 2 of efficacy trial showing that this is actually working in human and can prevent you from getting infected. The idea is a little bit like a hand sanitizer, where you use a hand sanitizer when you go outside and you need to clean your hands. It's the same thing. You go outside and then you just come back and you spray it in your nose and you can get rid of the virus. So it could be prevention. It could also be an early treatment, so early on the disease. And this is the trial we're doing right now.
What are the kind of challenges that you're facing actually doing clinical trials for an anti-COVID therapy? Because in order to test this, you have to find people who might have been exposed to the virus. They might be sick. There's been polls taken in the last week about whether people are going to be prepared to actually take the vaccine if the Pfizer vaccine is proved to be successful. Are you finding people are willing to join the trials?
there are lots of challenges. I think there are always challenges with doing clinical trials. We've been in this field for many years, and we've done clinical trials in other indications, and there are always challenges in clinical trials. But with COVID, it is so much more. First of all, because as Eyal said, we still don't know more than we know. This is changing all the time. And if you design a clinical trial 2 months ago, the design may be different today. The endpoints, what you're looking for is different. The outbreak centers are shifting. So, I mean, our biggest internal joke is all we have is to start a clinical trial in one location and we cure COVID, because then the cases come down and then it's hard to recruit, right? So you have to shift into a decentralized clinical trials, which is a new term coming up now with doing trials that are not in one location, one center, so you can recruit from different places. As for prevention, I think the big challenge is prevention needs very large numbers to show prevention. It's even a little bit more challenging for us than for the vaccines, because we need a control arm when we need to show that people in the control arm got infected versus people in the treatment arm that do not get infected. So you need a really large sample size. And in the treatment, if you want to look at people very early on the disease, then first of all, it's hard to find them, and you need to identify the people right when they're tested positive. And a lot of people, when they're tested positive, they're already sick for a week. So it's not necessarily early. Finding those people early on in the disease is challenging, and looking at what your endpoint. One of the, most of these studies are done in treatment later in the disease, when people are at hospital, very sick. If we want to show it early, then one of the endpoint could be, okay, let's look at hospitalization and how many people get eventually to the hospital, and we want to reduce this. But hospitalization is coming down because there are more young people getting sick. So this shifts as well. So all the shifts during this disease and the progression and everything we learn makes it very, very challenging in a clinical trial world. But we keep learning all the time.
So Eyal said, with all the caveats and all the challenges that need to be overcome, they might have the MigVax vaccine by the end of next year. Are you prepared to tell us when we might have SaNOtize to protect us in the meantime?
We just had a good meeting with Health Canada. We believe, from what we heard from them, that once we show an efficacy in a phase 2, they will consider releasing this to the market. So they will not require phase 3 due to the very strong safety profile of our treatment. So I would hope that by Q2 2021, this will have an approval. That's the goal.
Okay, I'll be speaking to you in about 6 months' time to check that out. Now, as we know, this crisis has thrown the world's health systems into turmoil. But even before the current crisis, the normal pressures of patient care were contributing to mistakes involving giving patients the wrong drugs and leading to unnecessary deaths. And that's exactly the purpose of Medaware, which is the company that was founded by Dr. Gidi Stein to address that issue. So Dr. Stein, before we come on to talk about your particular technology, I wonder how, as someone who knows the healthcare world well and up close, how much would you say has the COVID crisis changed the way that we deliver healthcare?
So hi, and really thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you. And you know, COVID is a terrible disease. Millions of patients are dying, but it also represents an opportunity because it takes to the extreme trends that were already brewing in recent years. And today we understand that being in a hospital could be one of the worst things that could happen to a patient. Hospitals are not safe. Patients get infected, physicians, nurses also get infected. So we have to change the paradigm by which we provide health and not hurting our patients in the meantime. And there are a lot of turmoil around that. And I think the trend is going into a distributed hospital, decentralized hospital. So think of the possibility that an elderly person can be hospitalized at home. Don't have to go to the ER, don't have to go through all the crowded spaces, all the nursing facilities. You can just stay at home and get your care at home. Now, suddenly, healthcare is not bounded by walls and by buildings. The same staff can provide health to a much wider audience and much safer health. Now, obviously, there are a lot of workflows, issues, and technological issues that prohibit us from doing so. But today, more and more emphasis is going on telehealth, on remote monitoring. And I think COVID brings us a wonderful opportunity to really change the paradigms of which we provide health to our patients by really treating them at home and shifting the center from the hospital to the patient home.
So, Gidi, if we take that to its logical conclusion, and we've heard similar thoughts from Johns Hopkins and from Sheba Hospital here in Israel on previous OurCrowd events dealing with healthcare, and so there does seem to be a move in this direction away from centralized hospitals. But Medaware deals with mistakes in prescribing and giving of drugs and medications. Don't you think that those kinds of mistakes and problems will be multiplied even more if you decentralize the care so people are taking things in their own homes?
So last week, there was a new article published in the Journal of American Medical Informatics Association, in which Medaware did in a partnership with Sheba, in which we have shown that overworked, tired, sleep-deprived physicians, unexperienced, have like a 2 to 8 times likelihood of erroneous prescribing. So obviously, even taking those hospitals and driving them into the extreme, and even in normal circumstances, the likelihood of erroneous prescribing and medication risk is quite substantial, especially in the middle of the night after two long shifts. And I agree that taking these distribution of patients to their home, far from the eyes, far from the heart, obviously a lot of room for mistakes and errors. And this is where I think technologies similar to ours can be of benefit, because we can provide the real-time monitoring of the sensor data, of the clinical data, and merging them and extracting only those rare events that can actually harm the patient and surfacing them to the providers or to the nurses or to the care coordinators. Because one of the challenges in treating patients today, and especially in a distributed manner, is that there's so much information. We are flooded with information as clinicians, and it's hard to know our left from our right. And within 5 minutes that we have to see the patient, really understand the longitudinal patient record. So if there is a sophisticated AI system that can really pick up the specific risks in real time and send them directly to the right providers and caregivers, this could facilitate a reducing of the overall patient risk and drive to more distributed healthcare and patients treated at home.
So just talk us through the Medaware system. How exactly does it intervene in the process in order to try and stop these mistakes occurring?
So what we do is basically listen to all the data that comes from the electronic medical records and from the sensors and the claims data on a continuous manner. And using our AI technology, we quote unquote understand and learn the behavior patterns of clinicians and identify outlier situations as potential errors and flag them in the right time. So if a physician will prescribe a medication that is a complete anomaly to the patient characteristics, or if suddenly a patient has a new lab test or vital signs, which usually is an outlier to the patient's medication list, then we would provide the right alert to say, hey, we may have a mixed match here. If a patient is bleeding and needs anticoagulation, it doesn't make sense. And this is where our AI platforms identify these risks and alert the clinicians at the right time.
Right. Let's go back to Eyal Desheh, because I wanted to talk to you about the question that Gidi has raised about the fact that this pandemic is not just a terrible disaster, but it also presents a kind of business challenge and maybe even a business opportunity. And how do you see the whole business model here has changed because of the pandemic? As you say, these vaccines are being produced in record time. You think you might be able to get your vaccine out by next year. Things are, this is not the way that you were used to doing things at Teva, I'm sure.
Well, first of all, we learned that that options are not just something that that high-tech companies grant to their employees, but a tool that government use to try to secure the health care of their population, and are willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on buying those options. Many of them are going to be thrown away to the garbage. So yeah, there are significant financial implications and business implications behind this. We don't know the prices. Okay, we don't know the prices. We know that if we take the analogy from the price of regular vaccines, they range between a handful of dollars to hundreds, depending on what kind of disease. So the prices are yet to be determined, and I think companies are kind of pretty silent about how much they're going to charge. I want to talk about the other half of this equation. No question that the wealthy world is going to be vaccinated once the vaccine is approved, is FDA approved or EMA approved, or any regulatory authority, the Ministry of Health here in Israel, and so on. But I think it opens a series of moral questions regarding who can afford it, who's going to get it, free of charge, or are we going to pay? Who is going to fund it, and who is going to finance it? No question. Look, Pfizer is a reputable, respected pharmaceutical company with a high level of ethics. Yeah, and I'm happy that they were the first to announce success, because they will set the moral tone. But they're not a charitable organization, and they spend money. They got money from the U.S. government, a lot of it. We don't know what kind of agreements they have behind the scenes on that. But hey, there's 7 billion people on this planet. If we want to get rid of this disease and make sure that we can try and prevent other mutations and other viruses that might develop out of that, we will have to really vaccinate the majority of the population on the planet, and at least 65% of the people that live here can't afford it. So I think the question is not financial. I think the question is of moral and ethics.
Let me throw that to Gilly Regev at SaNOtize. I mean, you are a small company. You're developing a therapy that could help to save the lives of millions, if not billions of people until we have a vaccine. How can you scale from testing 100 or 200 or 300 people in Canada to supplying billions of doses of your SaNOtize spray overnight?
This is definitely a challenge. What we have started from the beginning, and we've in parallel started to develop a new device, for example, that can help easily administer the drug. The drug in our case is very inexpensive, which helps to be able to eventually allow this to reach regions in the world that could afford it as well. I think what we are working in parallel is identifying manufacturing facilities, identifying drug production and distribution, and partners that have the capabilities and can help us move this forward once we get the approval. So we want everything to be ready to, as you know, before you release a drug to the market, there are lots of testing, and there is stability data that you need, and there is a lot of safety data that you have to collect before. So making sure that once we get to this point of approval, we are ready to give this to distributors and have the right partners at that point to help us reach as many people as possible. I think the biggest thing in our case may be that even if COVID is solved, and I don't know if it will ever be, but in some way, and even if there is a vaccine, our treatment could be a flu prevention. So it's not just specific to COVID or the next pandemic that we're going to see at some point. So I think that everything we do is not going to just get lost if this is not needed in this amount, but this will go into a flu prevention development further.
And Gidi, Stein, I want to come back to you because Eyal just raised this question that when it comes to the vaccine and who's going to get it, that's kind of a moral question. But we also see with the application of different medical solutions that you have to take the human factor into account. And the whole basis of Medaware is that doctors have been making mistakes. And I just wondered, that's not just a moral question, that's a human question as well. What kind of take-up are you getting from practitioners who are prepared to admit to their mistakes and want to use your technology?
So when we try to frame our technology, we try to be modest. We're not trying to teach physicians their work. We're not trying to teach their medicine. But you can do an analogy of spell checkers. I mean, you could be the best poet in the world, write the most wonderful songs, but still have typos. So you have a spell checker. It doesn't make you less of a poet. And we look at our system as a spell checker for clinicians. You could be the best doctor in the world, but you're human. You make typos in prescribing, in not looking up in the right time, all kinds of slip-ups. And we can just catch that and surface that. So it doesn't make you less of a doctor, just shows that we're all human. And we have shown that taking this strategy and there's a huge uptake of our system by the clinicians because they are aware of their own mistakes. Because although patients are the first to be influenced by the mistake, but there's a second wave. The second wave of the clinicians, nurses, physicians, and others that in pharmacies suddenly understand that due to their mistakes, some life was taken or a patient was harmed. And this causes depression and even in post-traumatic stress disorder. Nobody wants to be there because it's not bad judgment. It's a typo, right? Who wanna kill someone just because of a typo? And we're just making sure this doesn't happen. So framing it that way, physicians are accepting our system quite nicely.
Let's go back to Eyal, Desheh, because you mentioned something very interesting before. You mentioned the funding that various governments have given for the research into this vaccine, and there's been a lot of national pride from different governments. I'm British. We heard day after day about the Oxford vaccine and how that was going, and I know in different countries, different people want to be first in the race. Do you think that politicization, if it's occurred, of the funding of this vaccine, has that been helpful? Has it been detrimental? Is it something that you've been able to latch onto, or are you ignoring that sort of nationalistic side of things?
Well, yeah, there is a new, the new terminology about the nationalization of the vaccine, and we're going to hear a lot about this argument in the next few months. Look, if you ask me, I think if the world will learn to be a little less competitive and a little more humble and collaborative, we will all live in a better world. But few leaders will have to be replaced before that happens. But this is not a political discussion. This is discussion about our health, about the world health.
No, I just
And
wondered how the politics, if it's impacted the business at all.
I think I'll tell you what I think. Okay, I think that the politics of the vaccine is bad politics. Throughout the past 10 or 11 months, we've seen a lot of money being poured. And yeah, I can understand. I'm an economist by education. Okay, I can understand that it's cheaper to throw money to the hands of pharmaceutical companies and research institutes so they come up with a vaccine than to throw it on the economy and fund the unemployed. It's much cheaper and more economically efficient and effective. I can understand that. But what I haven't seen is global collaboration. I've seen China doing their own, and Russia doing their own, and the US doing their own, and Israel is trying to do their own with unlimited resources. And you're British, so the UK takes a lot of pride at the Oxford development, which is brought to market by AstraZeneca with all the complications. It's British pride. We have to forget about it. This is we're talking about a global pandemic, which is being delivered from country to country by iron birds that were invented 100 years ago, and there's no way to stop it. And anybody that believes that they will make sure their country is immune and the problem will be solved, it will not be solved, because there'll be other diseases. And I think that calls for some global collaboration. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that. We have seen that in wars, that countries create treaties in order to fight a joint enemy. This is an enemy which is now worse than some of the worst enemies of mankind in history. And there's no collaboration between countries. So if you ask me, politics, the vaccine politics is bad politics. I hope it will change.
Okay.
Excuse me, and apologize for being a bit blunt.
That's what we're here for. Gilly, Regev, I want to ask you a slightly different question. Here we are in something that's become known as impact investing, where we're looking at commercial companies, but we're also trying to do good and help people. When you approach your science and your business, are you looking at this in just a straightforward business manner, or are you also thinking, yes, I'm also helping to do good here?
I'm personally in this to do good. That's why I'm doing this. I don't think anyone would be able to work the way we work these days if there wasn't anything beside just to be successful. This is to change the world. This is to do good. We started this to help people with diabetic ulcers, to help people that are suffering from chronic sinusitis and from pain all their lives, and try to do good here. So I think part of our, and a bunch of our investors are impact investors, because part of the reason we're doing this is because nitric oxide can kill drug-resistant bacteria. And I think this is the big problem that we started the company from, is the reality that antibiotic is not going to work forever. And who knows, the next pandemic could be due to antibiotic resistance and not due to a virus. The options are getting lower and lower. large companies do not develop new antibiotic because it doesn't worth it for them, because they get resistance very quickly. So there must be a way to address the problem, and the only way is to get this impact investors and people that really care about what they put their money in, and trying to not just make a successful business, but also a business that would change the world, that would help people. And I think that's a very important point.
Gidi, Stein from Medaware, what was your motivation for founding the company? Was it because it looked like a good business, or was it because you saw this problem up close?
Before I started this company, I was a full-time physician on the way to professorship in Tel Aviv University. I teach students and residents, and I saw that this would be the trajectory of my life, and I definitely never thought I would do startups. I thought it's a completely crazy idea. But then I was encountered with a case of a 9-year-old boy that here in Israel died simply because his physician clicked on the wrong entry of the medication list and gave him the wrong drug by mistake. And the ease by which a physician can kill a patient just by clicking on the wrong button without any real safety mechanism was haunting. And I thought it could happen to me as a prescriber. It could happen to one of my kids, God forbid, if they go to the doctor. And I thought we should do something about that. And here we are today.
Okay. Well, we've reached the end of our time. Today, we've heard from just 3 of the 200 companies in the OurCrowd portfolio, and you can see more technology and startups and investment opportunities in both MedTech and many other sectors on the OurCrowd platform. That's all we have time for. I want to thank our speakers, Dr. Gilly Regev from SaNOtize, Eyal Desheh from MigVax, and Dr. Gidi Stein from Medaware. Make sure to join us for the next installment next Thursday. Thank you to John Darcy and our partners at SALT, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.